Hey, I'm Brittany Brown, and I'm going to be doing the setting for A Gathering of Old Men. A Gathering of Old Men is set in the South, and basically the main reason that Gaines chose the South because it directly connects to the issue. The South is notorious for having a history of slavery, prejudice, and racism, and all of these aspects combined help shape the land of the South, and more importantly, shape the history of African Americans. And so, through all of this, the African Americans, although they don't own the land, they're spiritually connected by their ancestors and through the struggles that they've been through to the land in the South. The time period for A Gathering of Old Men is the late 1970s, and segregation was outlawed in 1954, so it's been outlawed for almost 20 years, and there's still a lot of racial conflict. And we see this especially through Griffin, the deputy, and then more obviously through Luke Will and his followers towards the end of the story. Another thing is that they still have this widespread fear from Fix. They're worried that he's going to come and ride and avenge his son's death because it's just this idea that blacks need to be punished for something they've done. So even though the civil rights movement is, not long gone, but in the past, people are still having a hard time accepting this social change. And we really see this on Marshall Plantation, which is where the majority of the story takes place. And it's in Bayonne, Louisiana, which is essentially New Roads. And Gaines chose this. He's trying to stray away from an urban setting to a rural setting. And this is setting the scene for this idea that the people on Marshall are still living in the past. They're not accepting this new racial equality, and they're still experiencing a lot of social conflict. The Marshalls have, owned the plantation, and the blacks have been working their land for quite some time, but now the Creoles are coming in, and they have all their technology, and they're taking over the lands, and basically covering up what the blacks have been doing for all this time, and they're just basically being erased, and that's where we see the idea of progress and the idea of the tractor, which is a recurring symbol for basically covering up the African American history and culture. But we see symbolism of the African American past through the graveyard and the swamp. And they're not really big parts of the setting, but the African Americans go there from time to time, and especially in the graveyard, it emphasizes the intimacy of the black community because you see the graves and they're all sunken in and mixed together. You can't really tell whose grave is whose, but it shows that they started together as a close-knit community, and now they're still ending together even, after all their struggles and hard times. And then we also see in the swamp, this is where Charlie takes refuge, and in the past his ancestors have taken refuge into the swamp, from the plantation. And here he experiences a strong revelation, a strong connection with his ancestors, and that's what ultimately gives him the strength to go back to Marshall and admit what he's done, and he decides that he's going to stand with the others. And last but not least, we have Baton Rouge, and we don't really see this a whole lot in the story, but it is important because it shows a contrast to Marshall. We see Gil coming in from LSU, and he has this college education, and he's in a setting where there is racial equality, and there is, a change, and they're moving forward to equality, basically. And when he goes back to Marshall, he tries to convince Fix, his father, that he's still living in the past, and that, you can't take the law into your own hands anymore, that times are changing. And that's really the whole point of Baton Rouge, is just to see that contrast. And so instead of the rural setting where they're living in the past, you see times changing and moving forward in Baton Rouge. So that's basically it.